Pondercast is supported by listeners like you. By making a monthly donation to Patreon, you too can help support Pondercast to grow and grow and grow. Go to patreon.com/Pondercast. I'm Lori Brown. Let's Pondercast. This is how we're going to start 2019 with sex. Let's get our arms and our heads and our hearts around it. And just to register, how do you respond when you hear the word? How does your body respond when I say sex? That word holds a multitude of emotions, memories, and I think at different times in our lives, we can feel very differently about sex. But judging from your reaction to the word right now, today, how are you feeling about sex? And now think back. How were you told about sex? Think back to how you found out about how sex worked, how babies were made. Did that information come from your parents, older brother or sister, or an extremely worldly grade 4 kid? And how did all that information go down with you? My mom told me, and I can remember so much about that conversation, except my exact age. I don't know if I was 10, 9, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was up in my room, and my mom was in her room, and it was kind of quiet there for a while, and then all of a sudden she said, "Lori, can you come in here, please?" And I went into the bedroom, and she was sitting on the side of her bed with a Life magazine beside her. And it was the issue with these remarkable photographs of a fetus developing inside a mother's body. And it showed the whole growing process. And my mother planned her little talk around this magazine. And she told me about all the changes that my body was going to go through to get ready to be able to have a baby. And then she said, when two people love each other, the father has the seed and the mother has the egg, and somehow the egg and the seed come together and make the baby. What? Out of everything she told me that Saturday afternoon, it was that sentence, somehow the egg and the seed come together and make a baby, that stuck in my brain. That was the most intriguing, mystifying aspect of the whole thing. I remember watching her intently as she really, really struggled over that line. I could feel my mom's discomfort there. It was that sentence. And I remember as it went by, I said to myself, pay attention to that sentence because you're going to want to revisit that a little later on. And that somehow, how that magical seed and that egg got together, well, that has been a lifelong exploration. It never stops changing. Yes, sex manages to stay mysterious. Think about your first real sexual relationship, the one that felt right, with the person you were crazy about, the relationship where a lot of firsts happened. Can you dial back up the sexual intensity of that one? The desire that just about made your head explode? It was bonkers, right? How you could think of nothing else? It's kind of amazing that As teenagers, we weren't all hit by buses during that phase. I certainly remember walking around in a daze. The slow build of it, building trust and confidence. Oh man, the anticipation and the amping up of desire. Those stolen moments together in a basement, behind the school, in spite of the fact that everything in the world seemed designed to try and keep you apart. That rush of hormones slamming you together at every possible moment. Oh, what a brave new world it was. When the AIDS epidemic hit in the 1980s, I began thinking that, what if my generation is the last generation to have more than one sexual partner? AIDS made sex suddenly so much more complicated. A certain Canadian artist I know actually had a form that prospective sexual partners had to fill out and sign. It was exhaustive. Not that I ever saw it, I just heard about it. But what if we were the last generation to have this kind of sexual freedom? Can you imagine sitting with your grandchildren around your feet, them looking up at you adoringly and saying, "Grandmother, tell us the stories of when you were a girl," and you would tell them, "Well, when I was young, I lived in a world where everyone could have sex with many different people." "You too, grandmother?" "Yes, child. Multiple partners throughout my life, in a serial, monogamous kind of way, mostly." You know what? I think that scenario might still be true, but thankfully not because of AIDS, but because humans in some places in the world are just not into sex as much anymore. It's really not the future, it's happening now. Read the cover story in the Atlantic magazine called The Sex Recession. In the space of a generation, sex has gone from something that most high school students have experienced to something that most haven't. About 60% of adults under 35 now live without a spouse or a partner. And more of that age bracket aren't interested in having a partner, getting married, or even dating. Why? Economic pressure, surging anxiety, antidepressant use, digital porn, dropping testosterone levels, streaming television and smartphones, meaning we're too distracted, information overload, sleep deprivation, fear of having sexual advances misunderstood, fear of vulnerability. And some of the blame goes to parents for telling their kids that college is no time to be getting into a relationship. You have to build a career. No time for a relationship yet. In reality, the reasons are probably a bit of everything that I've just described there. But there was a bit of a bright light in the article. It says that maybe the diminishing amount of sex we're having is partly because young people aren't having unwanted sex as much. That the courage to say no and not feel pressured into sex may be gaining some ground. Hallelujah! That's good news. Oh man, but the thought that job and economic issues are stopping people from thinking they can have a relationship, that is pretty awful. Or that we're losing the ability to become vulnerable in front of someone else. Or that we're too distracted, too medicated, too exhausted to think about sex. That's dismal news. To live our lives without the intimacy that sex brings, though, I can't quite imagine it. Sex has been such an important part of my life. Would you say the same thing? How important? I think there needs to be a second parental conversation about sex with your kids. Beyond that first uncomfortable one about the mechanics of it all, how about a second one about the nature of sex and how we humans use and misuse this powerful tool we have? If you thought the first conversation was rough, the second one feels way harder because I think it's way more personal. And I've always thought that I should have the guts to give my kids that second conversation, to point out pitfalls, traps, but mostly about how to make sex better. And I never have. And somehow doing it here, in front of you all, makes it easier. Weird. So here goes. Everything I know about sex, but I was afraid to tell my kids. Oh, don't worry, this won't take long. I know eight things. Number 1, sex is amazing. It is a worthwhile pursuit. It bonds you to the world. It takes you out of yourself, beyond ego for a few tiny moments. It cracks open your heart and reconnects you to your body and to another human. Good sex is about vulnerability, intimacy, compassion, caring, feeling, and it can be all accomplished without words and in the dark. Sex can be more awesome than you can possibly imagine. Am I right? Number 2, you will have bad sex. And I'm afraid to get to good sex, some of it is going to be dreadful. You will choose badly. You will ignore your instincts and make mistakes. You will walk away and wonder, why was that so unsatisfying and unsettling? You need to be curious about how your own desire works and how your partner's works. You need to want to give pleasure as much as you want it for yourself. And you owe it to yourself to figure out what you need to make sex better. Number 3, speak up. Say what you want. Say what you don't want. And that's how you get to good sex. And it may take a lifetime to get to the point where you feel you can speak up without fear or embarrassment, but just keep trying to get there. Say more. 4, don't have the sex you don't want to have. If you don't feel like you're fully into it, it's either the wrong time, the wrong reason, or the wrong person. Oh, and 4B, crawling into bed with someone doesn't necessarily mean you have to have sex. You can just hold each other. You don't have to go further than that if you don't want to. Number 5, Oscar Wilde said, "Everything in the world is about sex, except sex." Sex is about power. Yeah. Beware the power dynamic creeping into your sex life. Powerful people are attractive. You know what? It's just built into our DNA. We can't help but be attracted to it. But power messes with ego, and it easily warps into sexual control and abuse. We're finally seeing sexual abuses of power come to light, and they are nasty. So hey, big shot, learn to leave the big important job at the office. Come home and be a partner. And if you're one of those people attracted to powerful people, learn to see the difference between love and power. Number 6, sex can heal. It's so strange that something that can be so damaging can also be so good for us. Never underestimate how good sex can pull you out of the depths. It changes your perspective. It shifts grief and worry. There is nothing like sex to bring you fully into the present. It brings you closer to your partner. Sex is good for you. Turn to sex, not away from it. Try it. Call me in the morning. 7, don't give up on intimacy. Don't drink the Kool-Aid that sex doesn't need intimacy. Sex might not need it, but you do. We have a deep human need for it. Intimacy at its heart is empathy, understanding, and compassion. And our ability for intimacy is the best of what it means to be human. Intimacy is closeness in openness. Can you do both? It's a skill that can take a lifetime to master. Stay close and stay open. And in a long-term relationship that will be threatened by resentments, fatigue, disappointments, and misunderstandings, don't turn away from intimacy. Stay close and stay open. 8, don't give up on sex, kids. Give in. Don't be afraid of surrendering to love and sex. It's one of the only ways in your life that you'll experience complete surrender, and it feels divine. There. 8 things. That's what I know about sex. So far. Sex is still a bit of a mystery to me. It still takes me by surprise, the intensity of feeling, and how intimacy changes everything. It's a language without words, where intuition, instinct, and vulnerability rule. Sex is power, and it's political. It's both power and submission. It's tough and gentle. It's risky and safe. It can feel like liberation or a trap, and it is corruptible in 1,000 ways. So stay aware. Sex is another language, just like music is. It was Darwin who told us that music holds the same seductive power as sex does. Is that why we love music so much? It's the rhythm of sex. It's the beat. Feel familiar? The beat, the relentless beat. And all around the beat is this intimate, wordless musical conversation. A strong melody line on top, with a song that attracted us to it like a mating cry. And under that melody, another one. And the two of them, with synchronized breath and beat, these two lines of song partner, listening and responding, playing off each other, enhancing, encouraging, fusing one to the other, creating something way beyond the sum of their parts. And you, the listener, something in there that you hear grabs you. And then it happens. Your heart suddenly opens, and you surrender to the music. Yeah, sex is like that.